Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast. We have Mark Vange with us. Mark is the CTO and he's an advisor for finance, entertainment, and security. He's the owner of his own company. It's called Autom8ly LLC since a year ago. Previously, and probably still is a co-founder and a partner at TechRound, and a bunch of other companies like tokenized, Fighter-based publishing, and so forth. So serial entrepreneur in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico. So Mark, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thanks, Charles. Pleasure to meet you. Thanks for having me on. I've been a technology repeat offender. I sold my first little game when I was 10 years old. Had 23 employees when I hit college. So college was 6 of the happiest months of my life. Then I had the number one selling game of Christmas of 1989 and left school and pursued my technology passion. I've built and sold 7 companies over the years, and I've seen a lot of technology transitions and a lot of lessons about how technologies get adopted and how technologies grow, and kind of the path between the evolution of the tech and the evolution of the use of the tech. I just, I can't stop. I just love technology and love bringing it to people. With the video game business, I've been around AI for 20 years. So it's not something new to me, but 2 years ago, when kind of the cost envelope just got crossed and GPT started coming to people's imagination, I got really interested in what AI adoption would look like in real business in the future. And that's how Autom8ly was born. And Autom8ly is really our way to understand how technology looks in 4 or 5 years when the human adoption cycle is complete. As we know and we feel kind of in our guts, technology changes really fast, but human adoption happens on a human timescale. So my job is to be 3 or 4 years ahead of where the world's going to be and understand what that's going to look like and build towards that and help guide our customers and partners towards that reality and understand how AI is going to be used to make real money for real people.
Interesting. And how did you first get into video games and then technology? Did your parents bought you computers and Segas when you were younger? What?
So the real story is I was born in the Soviet Union and I showed up in Canada when I was 10 years old and didn't speak any English. I was one of those kids who played the violin, and I was on my way to becoming a world famous violinist and so on. But the Apple II arrived at my school pretty much the same day I did, and it was a lot easier to learn to talk to it than to talk to the other kids. So eventually I learned English, as you can hear, but that was kind of my first introduction to the computer, and it was just it just was fascinating for me, and I just started and never stopped.
Interesting. And how did you transition from music or being like a world renowned violinist to video games? Did that sort of disappointed your parents back then?
Actually, it kind of did, because I was supposed to be, as I said, a world touring violinist, and I was also supposed to be a doctor, and instead I was a college dropout. So it took until I sold my second company before my mother forgave me, because the first one could have just been a fluke, right? So yeah, it definitely caused a little bit of noise at home, but also they understood my passion for it and my interest for it, and my dad was an engineer, so he kind of understood what I was doing more than my mom, who was the doctor. So yeah, it came around pretty organically. At 13, I was already running my own companies. I built the first teleprompter in Canada before I had a driver's license. So they'd come and pick me up from school, from junior high school, and drive me to where we were building the teleprompter after school, and that's kind of what I was doing when I was 13, 14. So it's always been a part of my life.
And what was your first failure in business? What was your first successful business after that?
Great question. So my first real success is I made a game that was the number one selling game of Christmas of 1989 called Dragon's Lair, and so that was a fantastic opportunity, and so that had a lot of success, and we made a lot of progress there, and then unfortunately that entity as a company fell apart around some personality and around some misunderstandings between me and the co-founder. So that first experience was very educational. It represented both the first success and the first failure. And kind of thematically, the success was around the technology and making cool stuff, and the failure was around not thinking about the human element and how to make systems grow and make processes work. And that's kind of informed my focus on adoption for the rest of my tech career.
Right. And yeah, tell me about the failure part as well, like especially the most painful one that you had in your career. How did you learn from those?
Probably the most painful one was I built a company in the crypto space that was kind of focused on compliance and was focused on allowing securities to be tokenized in a way that was consistent with securities law. So, in crypto, if you lose your wallet, you lose your assets, right? Everybody knows this. But under securities law, if I own a security and I get hit by a bus, my wife now owns those securities. And the fact that she doesn't know my crypto password or how to access the wallet doesn't change the legal construct of she now owns those securities. So this technology made it possible to work through that. And that was a very promising path. But unfortunately, with US regulators never really establishing a clear legal framework for how to have legal tokenized securities, the capability of having enforcement never really met with the legal requirements for that enforcement. And so we had to kind of pivot and we had to make some changes. But that was, a tremendous disappointment because that technology held a lot of promise. The whole notion of tokenized equity and the tokenized fundraising as being an alternate way to fund real businesses is still kind of a vision and still a dream. But unfortunately, crypto is still largely devoid of of mature business processes, in part because the SEC never really came around to providing clear guidance. They just told you everything that you can't do, but they didn't actually tell you what you can do. So that was probably my greatest disappointment and kind of failure, in the sense that it was too early, but the right time actually never came and still hasn't come. So
Right. And now your first official home run, maybe from an exit or just like a big win that you had where you went from sort of being broke to being financially independent. How did your mindset change after that? And what was that first big home run of yours?
um, I mean, I had a couple of smaller sales along the way, but our first really big sale was a company we built that was called Mobile Post Production, and that became the world's largest mobile porting company, which basically means we modified apps and games for mobile phones and basically produced the different versions to run on every carrier around the world in every language and so on. So some of the largest publishers in the world were our customers, and they would create the so-called reference builds, and then we would ship hundreds of versions of each of these products to go to all the app stores and all the different billing systems and all the different legal requirements in different jurisdictions and so on. So that was a very good exit, a life-changing exit. Eventually that company was acquired by Electronic Arts, and I became chief technology officer at Electronic Arts. So I was there for a while and got to experience the really big the company leadership role. Decided I am more about being an entrepreneur than being a cog in a giant machine, and went back to entrepreneurship.
Interesting. And yet, were you always wealthy? Like, when did your mindset actually change with financial security? I'm seeking to understand that because a bunch of us
Yeah.
start from nothing, right? So, did
Oh,
did your mindset change once you had that first big success?
So I had my first sale when I was 21 or 22, so that was pretty early. And I'm a first generation immigrant, so I did not have a lot. I didn't have any help from my family. I mean, I was always fed and clothed, but I didn't have any, financial or success in building the business. But I did have, an exit. It was, a couple $1,000,000, but that was a lot of money, 30 years ago. So I think the greatest thing that allowed me to do is to have the freedom to experiment and the freedom to um, feel like I didn't have to pay the bills while I figured out new opportunities, right? So when I talk to young entrepreneurs, I sometimes speak at universities and colleges and whatever. Um, I always point out to them the 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 power of not needing to have the salary, right? Being able to create the space and the time to be able to be successful. It is so much harder to be successful when you have a wife and you have the kids and you have the responsibilities, you have the mortgage, right? It's much scarier if you don't have nothing to lose, as it were, right? So, I don't know how instructive that is for someone who is 40 with kids, but I would say if you're a younger entrepreneur, get that out of your system or find that success really early when it's a lot easier to take the risk, right? It's been a lot easier for me to be entrepreneurial at 30, 40, 50 with a nest egg than it would have been if I was trying to still pay my mortgage and try to be entrepreneurial.
Right. And what's the best type of business to start early on if you want to have an early exit like you did? Is it like an agency? Is it being a consultant and stack up these high ticket clients?
Um, hmm. I actually think that any business where you're trading your time for revenue, which is consulting and so on, is fundamentally not a scalable business, right? I think that in order to build the kind of nest egg and to build the multiple, traditionally it was really more about, creating a novel technology or a novel understanding for something so that you could sell that know-how and it can be scaled, or it's selling a long tail revenue solution because you can get more multiples on that revenue and it's accretive, right? I think that consulting is more of a cash flow business. You can make a lot of money today, but then you're actually on a hamster wheel. It's no different than having a job, because the moment you stop doing new consulting gigs, you stop the revenue stream, right? So I think the challenge today is that we're kind of living in a, what I like to call a post code world. It is so easy today to build software that, something that would have worked, 10 years ago in terms of build a really cool piece of software and then sell that is actually not a viable business model today because anybody can build anything pretty much using AI and vibe coding and so on, right? So I think the greatest asset today that anybody can build, and especially somebody who is trying to transition to entrepreneurial life, is the network, the confidence, the deep understanding of a set of issues that allows you to differentiate yourself. I think ultimately, it doesn't matter how much AI we have in the world, people want to buy from people. So you need to make yourself the source of truth and the source of confidence for a group of people. And the larger the group, the wealthier the group, or the more um, kind of valuable are their needs, the the greater the value of that thing that you're building, whether it's a company or whether it's an association or whether it's a technology. I think the with very few exceptions at the very kind of far edges of tech, the idea of building value by building novel technology is kind of waning. And I think the real value is the relationships and the ability to monetize those relationships, which is kind of a crass way of saying the ability to provide customers confidence, the ability to understand their deeper issues, maybe even better than they do, and then the ability to provide those solutions for them.
Right. And Yeah, you mentioned that the world has changed nowadays. What if yeah, I vibe code an app and it really has value for very small niche that I'm attacking, a very precise niche, right? Like, can I still launch a SaaS that way? Like, what is the missing piece to making a lot of money quick nowadays? Now that everyone can sort of code a software fast.
So that's exactly what I'm talking about. So if you can build a cool app and it starts to catch traction, but you haven't got the mind share, you haven't got the authority, you haven't got the kind of access to the customers, somebody else who has the access can build that same app in a week, right? Like this is the difference from where it was a few years ago. It might take 6 months or 12 months to build the same app. Today, it can literally be built in a couple of weeks. So you need to start from really deeply understanding the needs, but also really deeply building the relationships. And the relationships is where the money flows. It no longer flows to the technology. And I think that's the big thing that a lot of traditional business approaches or last year's business books are not really teaching you. A lot of them are still focused on kind of building the IP and building the tech and all of that stuff. And I think that has completely been undercut by the wide ranging availability of AI, not just in software, but in almost any area. I foresee a future where instead of bidding on projects, we're literally just going to deliver projects and let the customer pick which one of us he wants to pay for doing the project. Because it's actually going to be easier to build the project than to build a pitch for the project, right? It's because the incremental cost of building it is so much lower and in terms of time and effort. So, this kind of idea of build the tech and then build the better mousetrap. I don't think that works anymore, particularly not in software businesses.
Interesting. And GTM, where would you focus your efforts nowadays? Cold email outbound, LinkedIn. How would you perfect your GTM to actually have an advantage once you vibe coded your project from scratch?
Um, I actually, again, think that the greatest opportunities lie through your soft network, right? So there's, and I forget who the author is, but this is not my idea, and I wish I could remember. But she talks about having the hard network and the soft network. The hard network are like your friends, your buddies, the people you hang out with, and they are a lot of fun and you trust them and you like them, but they actually know all the same people that you know. And so it's a very limited pool, right? Your soft network are like, your wife's boss, your dad's the golf buddy, right? Like these are people who you have access to, but in a soft way, who are coming from different industries or who are coming from different ages, different walks of life. But the ability to kind of find the people in that wider soft network that have an interest in the area where you operate leads to a much better separation. Again, because content generation is practically free, trying to stand out online, trying to stand out on LinkedIn, trying to stand out, on YouTube or on TikTok or whatever is just very, very hard. It becomes a full-time gig, and I think it's undervaluing again the really valuable asset now of the relationship and the trust. If I meet you through someone who we both know, I will get a better audience and I will get more trust, assuming that you trust the person who introduced us, than if I hit you up, because your mailbox is getting filled with people saying, "Hey, I can solve problem X, Y, or Z for you." Because again, the cost of the technology has gotten so low that anybody can build anything very quickly. Now it's about the quality of the relationship and it's about the trust. And I think that's a huge shift that a lot of people haven't really internalized yet.
And how do you scale that? Is podcasting a good example of that? Just inviting people on a pod, building relationship with them before deep fakes become a thing, and yeah, trust becomes even more shaky in a couple of years.
So I absolutely think that podcasting is a part of the solution. But also, the corollary of what I just said is, you in terms of like trust that you're a real person, that you actually stand behind your product. That's why that soft network is so important, right? Because if you get an email, even if it comes with a video or a podcast link or whatever, it's not the same as somebody telling you, "Hey, you should check out Mark. Mark is a friend of mine, and he's really smart, and he knows a lot about this. So since this is something that you care about, maybe you should talk to Mark or check out Mark's article, right?" So that is the place to start. Once you have momentum, once you have you know social validation, then you can, I think, continue to build the brand online. But I think the idea of starting to build the brand online has become harder and harder.
Yeah, but that is like less scalable. Like, and also people just won't refer you around. Like, hey, you should check out Charles. I think people are pretty busy nowadays. I think we sort of need a podcast engine for that. One, to get in touch with more people, and two, to just talk with them, show you expertise, and then follow up with them to tell them about what you do and make it super easy for them to actually refer you. Right? Like, I'm always seeking some scalable system, because if it's just like a soft or hard network, I'm not sure how that's going to grow with years, and it's going to be super unpredictable. Maybe like one referral every quarter, right? Like, which is why I'm
Sorry. I,
which
I,
is
I
why I'm talking about the podcast system. That seems to be pretty highly scalable and repeatable and authentic at the same time.
so for me, this kind of podcast interaction is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like, I am now leveraging you, my soft connection, to your network of viewers. They trust you to have validated that I'm worth listening to, right? And so therefore now we're having this conversation, and now this is helping me get the word out about the cool, human centric, cooperative AI that I think is the future, rather than pure autonomous agent AI, right? So now you are part of my soft network. So I absolutely agree with you that podcasting is a big part of it. And it's actually exactly the kind of relationship I'm talking about.
Right. And nowadays, I'm curious, like we talked about the time in which you were financially independent. Why turn to investing in other businesses? How have you been successful on that level via being an entrepreneur? And has it fulfilled your objective since you started doing that, I believe, a couple of decades ago?
Um, so honestly, I've not had any real home runs through businesses that I directly invested in that I wasn't actively a part of. I think that from my personal experience, the success rate on that is pretty low. So actually, now that I've had some success, I actually have my assets managed professionally, and I focus primarily on building my own businesses where I can be a part of the success of them, a part of making the success. Um, I did, when I first kind of had a big exit, try to do a little bit more kind of third party investing. Um, and I think this is pretty common when I talk to other people who have gone through the same sort of journey that I have. And very few of us have been successful in kind of investing in other people. Um, it's that early stage investing is very, very risky. And at the same time, I just love playing with technology and building technology and understanding technology. So I would be playing with the technology anyway. Building the company is just a way of keeping score, but I'm in the code regardless. So this is kind of a way of monetizing the thing that I love to do.
Are you more worried than you are excited about the next agentic phase we're about to hit?
No, I'm actually very excited about it. I think that AI is going to be a huge enabler for people. I don't actually believe that the future is, AI replacing people. Yes, there'll be some autonomous AI, but good autonomous AI is really hard to build and really expensive to build. And ultimately, I don't think it's what the world wants, right? Like, if you're my plumber, I don't care what brand of wrench you use. I just want to know that you'll be there at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night when my water heater explodes. right? For me, again, it's all about that kind of human connection and the human trust. So I don't care what AI you use. If I'm using you as my lawyer, I don't, I'm not leveraging your AI. I'm leveraging your law firm. I'm leveraging your education. I'm leveraging your liability insurance. I'm leveraging your legal license. And none of those things are replaced by AI. The fact that you're using AI to be more productive, more efficient, I don't care, right? It doesn't change the things that made me choose you versus some other lawyer.
And as a video game guy, last question: do you feel we're in a simulation? What are the probabilities of that being real?
I'm not a huge fan or a huge believer in the simulation hypothesis. I think we are where we are, but also ultimately, I don't know that it matters if the simulation is realistic enough. Then A, we can't know, and B, why does it matter? Because we're still living it. So
Mark, thanks for being on today. Where can people find out more about you?
Autom8ly.com is the company. I am the only Mark Vange on the internet, so you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on YouTube, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you, Charles. Thank you so much for having me on.
So that was Mark and Charles for another founder.